In this tutorial video in Azure Centric, the idea is for me to pass you what are the options of creating a virtual machine in Azure. We are using right now the portal for this particular video, and just to see that sometimes a virtual machine can be very easy to create, although there are a lot of options that we need to take in consideration. On this video you will see some of the tips and tricks, some of recommendations, and some of the best way to deploy the VM, and you can do it on a very complex way, on a very simple way. There is a lot of options that we need to go through. I hope you like this video. If you like, just give a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to help us out, and let me know if you have any questions or any comments. Just leave it below on the video. Thank you. The idea of this tutorial is to show you how to create a virtual machine in Azure and all the options that you have on the portal. Of course that you have the option to create these through Azure CLI or PowerShell, but the idea over here is to just go into all the options on the portal to make it easier, and even then to create, as we'll see on the end of the video, to create a template that I can reuse a lot of those times. So the first thing I need to do is on the add Dropbox, I have two types. One is the virtual machine and one is the preset virtual machine. This is the preset configuration, is something that we are not covering right now, but we are creating only the virtual machine. Basically, this option of the preset is create a virtual machine where you have already some configuration preset. I will create another tutorial around that. But for now, it's the virtual machine. So this is the basic components that we need to create on a virtual machine. First, we need to select the subscriptions. If you have more than one, like my case over here, you're going on a drop-down menu and you select the correct subscription. Then becomes the resource group. So a resource group is kind of a folder that you have on Azure where you can manage all of the resources and group them together. You can give permissions to this resource group for specific users, or it's the way that you can tie everything together. So when you create a virtual machine, you are creating a number of resources. So by default, or in this case, my recommendation is to create a resource group for each virtual machine. It's not very good standards, or in this case, best practice, to just place all the virtual machines in one resource group. You don't pay for the resource group, it's just a matter of organizing all of your virtual machines. So in this case, it's highly recommended that you create a virtual machine or a resource group for a virtual machine. To create a new resource group, I just click create. Usually you just need to follow your naming convention. Over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just saying RG dash, I will put the location where I will deploy these virtual machines, so West US 2 for example, and then I will give the name. In this case, we're going to call Azure Centric Demo VM. So then I will know just by the name that this is a resource group, and this object, the resource group, is located on West US, and this is the name that I'm calling. I can even put over here, for example, the environment. It's either recommend, so say test, and then dash AC as Azure Centric Demo VM, for example. And then I click OK, and when I finish this, it will create this resource group. So far, I didn't create anything. Then it's up to the name. So let's give AC Demo VM the name, for example. And now, because we select over here the resource group where it's located, we're going to put the West US 2 just to follow what we put on the name. We don't need to, but it's good to just follow. And this is the region that we are talking about. The region, it's important because a lot of those regions, they have different types of availability, high availability in this case, and you are allowed or not depending on the size. We will cover that. But now this is important for the second or in this case for the next option, that is the availability options. So if I'm going to drop down, I have availability zones and availability sets. Availability zones is nothing more than when you're deploying this VM, you are deploying across different data centers. Availability zone inside of Azure is a data center. So there are zones or there are regions that they only have one availability zone, two availability zones, or either three availability zones in this case. And this means that you have more resilience on that region. Availability set is the way that you can create or you can deploy the VM across different racks. So you are on the same availability zone, okay? So you are on the same data center, but you are saying to Azure that when you create this availability set, the number of VMs that we are deploying or the deploying of the VMs in this availability set, it will not be placed on the same, of course, domain. And that is up to you to configure. So if you want to configure availability zone, you select availability zone, and then over here on the availability zone, you specify where do you want to deploy this VM. If it's on 1, 2, or 3 availability zone, okay? And if you select one and the next one that you are creating, you can deploy on the 2 and so on and so forth. So then you can create yourself, okay? So this is how you're doing the availability zone. And then on the, if you select, instead of availability zone, if you select availability set, the configuration, it's a little bit different. So now you are creating an object, okay? And all the objects that we are creating inside of this resource group. So we are creating an object that's called the availability set. So in this case, I need to create new because I don't have anything. And by the name, I will say that this is my availability set on West US 2 on my test environment for my, for example, web demo VMs, for example. Okay, so it's just the name. So this name, what gives to me, and this is the part that I like and I highly recommending, a convention name that is bulletproof, is what I like on the names is I can see the name, look at the name, and identify what is inside. So I know this is an availability set, for example, in West US 2 on the test environment, for example, and using my web demo VM. So I will place all my web demo VMs over here, for example. And this is the default domains. So the default domains, what we are saying is they are sharing exactly the same physical network switch. They are sharing everything. So it's the same rack. Okay. So how many racks do I want to expand? I have the limitation in this case up to 3. In this case, and on the update domains is, and this is the part that is important, why we need these availabilities, because there is a misconception when we deploying a VM without this option of availability option that the VM is high available. It is high available, but you cannot program or you cannot make sure that when you're deploying the next VM, and this could be the first web server, when deploy the second web server, that will be on a different rack, on a different host, on a different domain, let's call it this way. Okay, so what I'm saying over here is every time I'm deploying in this case a web server into this availability set, I'm making sure that I'm not deploying on the same that I did deploy the last time. So I have 3 in this case. I can do up to 3 fault domains, and I can do up to 20 up domains. Okay, so what does that mean? means that I can deploy this up to 20 domains. So basically I have basically 20 hosts that they can be deployed into this. Of course, what happens if I'm going on the 21st VM that I'm adding on this availability set? Of course, that after that I will deploy, in this case, on the same one, on the same host, on the same rack that I deployed the first one. But what I'm saying over here is every time I'm deploying, I make sure that is on a different domain, on a different rack, on a different host. What is the gain of that? The gain is Azure have maintenance. Azure have Microsoft does maintenance on Azure, as you can imagine, a lot of times. And a lot of times they need to update, for example, the host, either update firmware, whatever they need to do it, and they need to do the reboot. So what I'm saying is every time that they need to reboot that host or reboot that rack or update that domain, what I'm saying is I will not have all the VMs then on the same domain. I'm spreading across the domains that I'm doing. The availability set, there is no cost associated with this. Basically, what we are saying is that we want to make sure that we have some availability options regarding my deployment. So when there is an update, I don't jeopardize, in this case, my configuration or my performance on the VM, and now I will not have any VM or try to minimize the number of VMs on the same host, because if there is a failure, then I'm not impacted as much. So it's not high availability, but it's some kind of availability that you have over here. So then I just click OK, for example, and now on this case we're going with the availability set. Just to give an idea, this is our name, this is configuration, and then it becomes the image. So if you're going on an image, if you go on the drop down, you will see that I only have this image. But it's not the only image that I can deploy on Azure. I have way more. This is the top image that is being used. So if I want to see all the image, I can click on select all the image, and now I'm going to what's called the marketplace. So the marketplace is where Microsoft or the vendors, in this case, they update the image. They are responsible for update the image, and I can select. So I can select from different images: Windows Server, Red Hat, SUSE, Debian, Ubuntu, whatever it is that I want to use it. You have over here everything is available. So regarding these are the feature ones. Regarding application infrastructure, operating systems, you can see that I have a bunch of operating systems available. It's up to me to choose what I want to choose. Okay, so in this case we want compute, we want to deploy, for example, a Windows Server, and over here if you select, in this case you have all the options that I have. So 2008 R2 SP1, yes, you can still deploy that. Microsoft, before the end of support of 2008 R2, extended that on Azure. This is the only way that you can deploy it. Otherwise, it's not supported anymore if you have a server 2008 R2 on-prem, at least at this present day. But then you can have all the different versions that you want to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the data center, 2019 data center, for example. Okay, and here it is. It could be exactly the same way as we're doing over here, data center. Exactly, this is the feature ones. I have no problem with that. And then I have another option that this is really cool, especially if you want to save a lot of money, is the Azure Spot instances. So Azure Spot instances is, but you need to be careful with this, okay? Azure Spot instance is, Microsoft have a lot of unused Azure capacity. So what they're doing is they offer this at a discount rate. So you pay as you go, although, okay, you are on the lowest priority. What does that mean? Means that if you don't select this, your resources will always be available, although you are paying the full price of the VM, of the size, and we will see that. Okay, if I select spot instances, my price will drop down, but if it's required that capacity, or if it's required those resources, I will lose my VM. Okay, so you need to be careful on that. Sometimes if it's for a test or to doing a test to just save some costs, it's good to have that. And when you select Azure, you have the two parts that you want, or two options that you want to do it. It's called the eviction type. And this is the part that you need to understand. So you are not getting, and even if the VM is running and you are using, you are not having the capacity all the time. If I don't select the Azure Spot instance, for example, this CPU, one CPU, 1 gig, still, as long as I have my VM running, I have those resources. No one will take the resources away from me. Okay. If I select the Spot instance, although the price is going to be way lower, okay, I will say when the time comes when Azure needs that resources, what's going to happen. So this is what's called the eviction type. Either the capacity only, so evict virtual machines when Azure need the capacity for pay-as-you-go workloads. And then you can define what is the maximum price that you want to set up. So even over here you can set up all the prices. So imagine that you want to put some price, there is the minimum, and you want to say I want to have like 20% more, but it's still below what is the full market. I can use it. Or in this case is you want to price or capacity. Choose the maximum price, and Azure will evict your virtual machine when the cost of an instance is greater than what you define the max price is. Okay, so this is something that is really cool. I found really cool. I used several times, and I use for test because I'm concerned about more the price, and then if something happens, something happens. So when this eviction happens, this is where the policy it's really important. What we're going to say is the by default is stop deallocated. What that means? Means that when the Azure recoup those resources that you are using at lower cost, you are just stopping that workload and deallocating. So it means that you are not using anything. You are just don't lose the VM. Okay, you are not losing the VM. You are just deallocated. So all the disks remains there. If you want to start a VM without a spot instance at that time, you can, but then you just pay the full price. Or if you want to be a little bit more radical, you can select delete. So when these come, you delete everything, and now you don't pay for anything else when this time of eviction. You may ask, but do I get any information? Yes, you will get a notification when they need those resources to be known. As usually, I recommend to just stop deallocate, because you might need to just spawn another VM, and then you can use exactly the same disks, right? And here is all the size and the pricing. So you can see the pricing and the history, for example, on West US, depending on what you want. So for example, let's go to a DS3, and you can see the price is being, in this case in US dollars, the top is being this, okay, and the lowest is being over here. So you save a fair amount of money that you are doing. So the eviction rate is by 15 to 20%. Okay, and you can select this if you want to Central US. If you want to change the eviction rate, it's lower. So you have less risk of going for West Central than West US 2 because you have 15 to 20%. So this gives you a little bit, and this is the time span of the last 3 months. So you select this, for example, and now your price it's way lower. Okay, so you are paying 0.03012 dollars per hour. Okay, on this is a pay as you go. Okay, when the time comes, it arrives. When the time comes for the eviction, on those, this is what you're paying. And then, how much do you want to pay? This is the price is greater than this. You need to be greater. This is the minimum, and you say that I want to pay 0.0, for example, 31. Okay, so it needs to be greater than this. This is the minimum, and I say, okay, I want to maintain, even if Microsoft needs to increase the price, I want to maintain to this maximum. Okay, if I select this option, okay, see that the price is changing completely. Okay, and now I'm saying it's capacity. I don't care how much I will pay, it's about the capacity. Although it's lower than what is cost of this size if I'm not using stop instances. Okay, so DS1 V2, if I take this out and if we select, it's $109 per month. Okay, and this is what it is for this one. If I select exactly the same, it's going to cost me this. Okay, or if I select, it's going to cost me this. This is the maximum that we are paying. But if I want capacity, I can lower that. I can even save even less than that. Okay, so this is just to explain the Azure Spot instance. In this case, I will not create that. I will leave like this, and I will create my user. This is your user to just give, and just the password that you need to access that VM. Okay, just type the password, and this is the part that you're starting to configure the inbound port rules. So by default, this VM doesn't have access to the internet. Okay, and if you want to manage this, because this is the only VM that I have, I need to allow this port RDP. Okay, so by default, if I select none, all of this is going. But if I want to have access to this VM, I have to select RDP so I can access to this VM. So basically what I'm configuring over here, and you will see this, I'm configuring the firewalls, in this case the NSG, to allow RDP into the VM from outside. Okay, or not from outside, yes, from outside of the RDP, in this case from NSG. Licensing, if you have the Azure Hybrid on your licensing, you can save up to 49%. So what does that mean? If your machine, if your user or your company is already deploying and is already having Azure Hybrid benefits, your license, if you select this, the price will decrease. Okay, so loading the price, it was $109, now is $53. So just to show you again, if I take this off, the price is going to be to $109 per month. Just give you a second. Here it is, 0.32. If I say that I have the licensing, okay, it goes down to 53.26. I need to confirm that I'm eligible. So if what happened is, if Microsoft, if you select this and you don't have these benefits, then if you are audit, you will be in trouble. So it's really to just choose what is applicable for you. If you don't have these Azure benefits, don't select this. I will not select this because this is only for demoing right now, and I don't have Azure hybrid benefits. So then it's coming to the disk. Okay, so here is the options. By default, it's coming premium SSD. We have three types of SS disks types that I can have on my virtual machine. Standard ADG, that is the slowest although the cheapest. Then we have SSD, and then we have premium SSD. By default, what I recommend is, at least for the operating system, give a standard SSD. You will see a lot of improvement and a lot of performance on the virtual machine using standard SSD. And the price, it's not that as much of a difference, to be very honest. If you really want to have a very fast virtual machine, then you can select premium. But depending on the workload, of course, for normal workloads, I always select the standard, and when I need is the data disk to select the premium. Okay. From my benchmark, depending on the VM, and of course depending on the VM, for very normal, you might there is not much of a difference of a standard SSD on the premium SSD regarding a normal VM for the OS disk. Okay, and this depending on the type of server that you are deploying, of course, but usually by default I always select standard. And here is the part that I like about this, is the encryption. By default, if you were familiar with Azure and creating virtual machines, this option was not available. This is a recent option that they added, because by default we are not creating VMs that were encrypted. That was a post step that I need to do it on the creating VMs, at least on the portal. Right now they give that option. They give that option. By default is encrypted at rest, so means that I'm encrypting this VM no matter what it is. Although I have an option that is double encryption with the platform manager or custom management keys. What does that mean? Means that if I select this, this is the default one, okay, or in this case this is the default one with the platform managed key. The key is on the Azure key, right? And then I can manage that, and I can encrypt it if I need to. If I want to encryption with the custom managed key, and now I need to give what is the key. Okay, I need to give what is the disk encryption set. In this case, I don't have any available because I don't have any of this. Okay, if I select the double encryption, I'm saying that it's double encrypted with Azure key with my key as well. Okay, so it's double encryption with the platform managed and custom management keys. So it's the platform that have the key, and now is the management key. I will use by default this one. Okay, and then is the data disks. This is a very interesting one, is because I can create a very brand new disk or attaching the disk. If I have already a used disk anywhere else that I have on Azure on this subscription, I can attach that disk. Or if I want to create a new one, I just simply create a new one. And by default, what it does is grabs my name of my VM underscore data disk underscore 0, because this is the first disk. I have on the source type, I have the option of empty, or I have option of coming from a snapshot of a disk or coming from a storage block. Again, this is a disk. This is the data disk that we are adding to the VM. It's nothing to do with the operating system disk, the OS disk. Okay, so by default you can create by empty. Although this is by default, you don't need to change this, or if you want to change, you can change it. But even this, it says that we are not creating a disk of 1024 gigs. This is the size that is showing inside of my disk. Okay, what I want you to show is, if I click over here on the change size, I can now select what is my premium disk, what type of disk I want, and as you can see, I'm starting to have all of those benchmarks. What is the disk tier and what is my IOPS? Of course, that this is a premium SSD. If I select standard SSD, my IOPS will change, and even if I select standard HDD, it will change as well. So in this case, I will select the premium SSD just to show you one thing. Over here, I select the size, and again, this is gigs in bytes. Okay, so this is the part that you have the disk available. So if you put 1024, it will show you 1024 inside. Okay, but the part is, oh Marcos, how I can create a disk that is a P15? I don't want to have a P30. I want to have a P10. So by how I can select this, I can either go over here, but the curious part is, what happens if I want to change this? If I put 257, look what's going to happen. It changed me my disk to a P20. So means that if I put 124 is the maximum of disk is a P30, but if I put 125, it's now a P40. So if you want to put 1000 gigs, it's going to be a P30. Okay, and this is your size in this case of the disk. I just want you to know this little thing, because sometimes you don't want to have two gigs, because it's, or in this case 2000 gigs or 2 terabytes, but you want to have a little bit more, so you can do it. You by doing 255, you are on a P4 and now P40, and now your IOPS it's increased by 50%, just to give an idea. Okay, so we'll create this. What is the performance that we want? And this is the part that we can select. So we can select, in this case, how we want to do it, on this by default or by P50. Okay, on selecting this, because it's exactly on the same IOPS that I want, although I'm only paying for this, right? For example, P40, and then I click OK, and here is my disk. Is again the default encryption, and if I want to share or not this disk, what is this option? This option is, if I want to share this disk, how many shares do I want? 3, 4, or 5? So this is a good option if you want to share a disk among other VMs. So this is a good way when you can create, for example, if you need to build a cluster on Azure, this is a good option to use. Or if you just need to share that disk, because this is not a OS disk, this is your data disk, and you want to share across different VMs. And this is the part that you can set up this. In this case, I will say no. Okay, I will click, and here is the advanced if I want to use management disks. Ephemeral disks is nothing more than going on a local virtual machine, and you are doing that, you are saying that you want a persistent remote storage. Okay, usually only if you really need this part, you have to unselect it, and then it says where is your storage account is there. Okay, and then then you can create and appoint to the storage account. Manage disk, Microsoft will manage all of that for you. You don't need to care where is the disk located. You just want, in this case, the disk to be created there. Standard. I did create a disk. Oh, okay, because I did not use manage disks. Okay, default, everything okay. Click OK, and here is my disk. And this is the part where you can configure the host caching. Okay, read only, read write. So what does that mean? Means that you are giving priority to host cache. If this is, for example, is a disk where you have a database server that you are building a SQL probably you want to have a read and write. If it's only like a file server, you are just giving the privilege, in this case on the caching, to be faster on the read only, for example. In this case I will select none, and then we're going to the networking. And this is where it's starting to be fun, all of this configuration. So then I select my virtual network. In this case, I don't have any virtual network over here. So by default, it's creating new. If I want to create a new virtual network, I can create a new virtual network. I just click create new. Okay. By default, it's highly recommended that you already set up your virtual network before you creating the VM. It's not what happened over here on purpose. So I will create new. So I will say that this is my VM, my VNet. For example, I don't need RG on the name. I will say that this is my VN. This is my range of IP. So now I'm using a /24, means that I only have 256 address, means that I only have 254 address available. I can select more ranges. I will leave by default. I can create the subnet as the name as default, or I can come over here, control copy, for example, control C, and say this is my subnet, and this is where I want to be range of. So I can even say that this is my subnet. I can say this is a 16, for example, and over here I give exactly the same name, and I say subnet, and now I put the range that is 10, 10, 10, sorry, 10, 0, 0, 0, /24. So what I mean is I have a /16, so I have 65,000 IPs on this range, but I'm only carving on this range of IPs a subnet with 256. So I have a lot of things to grow over here. Okay, I can put, like, for example, let's say 27 over here. That is way, or even 28. That is way better because I'm only using for this, and this is my I can even put over here, for example, the name. I can say web server, for example, and I can even create another one, for example, on West US, and say that this is my DB server, and now over here is going to be the 10, no, 0, 0, oh, sorry, 0, 16, 16 /28. Okay, for example. And now what I'm saying is, on this VNet, I'm creating two subnets on the one go, and then when I click OK, everything is configured. So now if I coming on a subnet, I can see if this is a web server or DB. This is a web server, for example, and this is the public IP. By default, it gives on the name of the VM /IP. If you want to create new, you can create new. We can create a new one over here. What is the SKU? So there are different SKUs over here. So the standard, the SKU allows you to have load balancer or not. The dynamic, this is important in this case for you to know that by default is dynamic. What does that mean? Means that if this machine is deallocated, I will lost my IP address. I can have static. So it means that when I create this VM and when Azure assigns me this public IP, even if I deallocate this, it will remain there. It will not be reallocated. In this case, I will use this. I just use, usually I put another P that is IP public for me, just for me to know. And over there you can see what is the NIC, in this case network security, if you don't want one, basic or advanced. If you're going on advanced, now you need to configure all of the rules, and we will come back on that. Okay. If you want to public import rules besides this one, this is where we configure. Remember, we configure this on the basic. Now we are on the networking, and this is where it's coming over there. So if I click on advanced and I click create new, by default the RDP, because I select there, is already here. As you can see, this is RDP inbound. Means that if I'm on this virtual machine and I have other virtual machines that I want to remote desktop, I cannot do it, because then I need the outbound rule. So if I need to add any other port, I need to add on both. Okay, so that's the part that you need to create one. That's why I'm going to the basic, just to simplify that. This is the public ports that you want to allow. So besides the basic port that you are doing, you are allowing on the public ports as well, so on the public IP. And if you want to place this VM on the load balancing, so if you select here, then is all the configuration that you need to do it. What type of load balancer do you want? Application on gateway, for example. And if you have any type of load balancer, it will appear over here, the load balancer that you want. In this case, we don't have any load balancer. It's an option that you can set up regarding this VM. On the management side, the part that you have is I already mentioned that my subscription is protected by the Azure Security Center, so it's already adding that part on my Azure Security Center on the hybrid cloud. But then I have boot diagnostics. So the boot diagnostics for monitoring is nothing more than I want to have some kind of insight what's happened when the virtual machine boots, because sometimes if I put disable over here, I don't get any diagnostics while my VM is booting, right? If I select the enable, I can select enable and create a management store, or I enable and I put a management store. So this is where I can put all the monitoring into a diagnostic management store, or a stored account in this case. So then I can recoup all the logs and everything else that I want to have it. So by default, it grabs my my name and put diag as a storage account. In this case, I can create one. I can leave like this. This is my, as you can see over here, the name of my resource group. I can leave like this, and this is just appending the diag, and I can even add the diagnostics of my OS. So what does that mean? Means that all the metrics regarding my VM I will store as well into this storage account. So then I can have more insight, and then I can plug, for example, something like log analytics into this storage account to pull that data and to see what's going on with my VM. Okay, for example. So I leave like this, and then on identity is you have this new option called the system assigned managed identity. So what does that mean? Means that I can starting to create some users and place them on the Azure Key Vaults. This is good for services. This is good for all the things that you need to have regarding this VM that needs to be accessible. So if I create over here, I will assign my managed identity, so I can grab that user that I'm placing, that I did create. I can put on the Azure Key Vault and I can call them. Okay, Azure Active Directory, so you can log in. Again, this is in preview. Okay, right now. So you are basically assigning your Azure AD credentials, and then you can do it all the roles of RBAC to enforce MFA to just connect to this server. So it's another layer of security that you can have to your virtual machine. This one is really important, the auto shutdown, because if I select this, I can say that I want to shut down every time at 7 p.m. what is the time zone that I want. By default is UTC. So because I'm in Calgary, so I'm on Mountain Time. So say that at every 7 p.m. at Mountain Time, it will shut down, and it will notify me to my email. Okay, and this is a good thing because I want to notify that before shutdown. It says that, hey, I'm about to shut down your VM. Do you want to continue or not? Because sometimes we are working, we forget about this option, and by default it shutdowns every single time. This is only regarding shutdown to save you costs. If you don't want to shut down, you just unclick this option and you are not shutting down. Okay, so this is a basic way to do it. Okay, that you are doing no matter which day at 7 p.m. Basically, it's configured to a 7 p.m. at Mountain Time. It will shut down the VM. So basically, there's an automation behind it that you are incorporating into this VM to every single day to shut down at 7 p.m. There are other ways that you want to do it a little bit more granular. For example, on the weekends, you want to shut down completely day. You want to start up at the other days. This is not the option that it's good for you. So that's why I'm leaving right now off. And then the backup. You can create a backup for this or enable the backup automatically out of the box. So what does that mean? It means that by selecting this option, when we press the last part of creating the virtual machine, the virtual machine after being created, it will be automatically added to this recovery service vault. And then the policy that you have. By default, I don't have anything over here. I need to create one and the policy. So in this case, I will not use this option, but you can use it. Okay. And then is the guest OS patches. So how you want to patch this? Because you don't have this Azure orchestrated patching is still in preview. I don't have this option available. I can OS orchestrated patches that will be installing by OS or manual patching. This is to you to just being over there. See over here, your subscription is not registered. If I want to register for patching, in this case, Microsoft will patch my VM as well, although this is infrastructure as a service. So you can select the manual patching to just say that I want to control because I have other systems that I want to use it. So I leave by default over here. On advanced, that's the part of extensions. So if you want to add an extension, you can add an extension. Just click. This is all the extensions that you have by default. For example, okay. So if you want to have PowerShell design set configuration, you add this custom script, Azure Performance Diagnostics, Microsoft Anti-Malware. You can come over here and put this, and now becomes on your enable the protection. If you want to real the scan, how you want to scan this VM, what type of that, you can click, and now basically you did configure the anti-malware inside of your server to run on those specific settings. Otherwise, you didn't. If you want to select another one, you can. If you want to create a script to just kind of creating all of the code that you want to add when you are provisioning the VM, this is the place that you can put your script over here. The part of the host is if you have dedicated host. So what does that mean? But you said, but Marcos, when I'm creating a VM, I cannot control when I'm putting all of this VM. True, but you have an option to have a dedicated host for this VM. So this is a VM that requires a dedicated host. For example, this is an option that you need to put it over here. So you need to have this already created, enabled on your subscription, configured, so you can be able to select over here. The placement group is where you want to put the VMs together on the same placement group. So here is if you want to logical grouping those VMs to make sure that the compute resources are physically located, are close to each other. For example, regarding latency, this is where you have to create. So this is all the tags that you need to create prior to create the VM. As you can see, as I recommended on the networking part, that you should create the VNets before, although you can still creating while you're doing all of this for the first VM. Over here you need to create before. You cannot create while you are creating the VM. You need to be already in place so you can do it. And this is the gen, because this is an Hyper-V VM. This is the VM generation. So what does that mean? By default, all the VMs are generation 1. Okay. If you want generation 2, you don't have the Azure Disk Encryption. Although you gain, because generation 1 it's a BIOS type of VM or generation VM. The generation 2 is UEFI type of generation, so you have other things that you can use it on generation. So in this case, I will leave generation 1 just for a purpose. But this is like, if you are familiar with Hyper-V, you have Gen 1 and Gen 2, exactly the same over here. Okay, and then is the tags. Okay, the tags are really important because it's where you can customize it, a lot of that automation. So for example, I can start to creating some of those tags over here. So for example, I can say environment. I don't have any types over here, and I can say test, and I can say role, and this is a web. Okay, for example, and I can see OS, for example, and I can say this is a Windows. And even if I want to create for shutdown, I say, for example, shutdown, but then I need to create all of that, and I say what is the shutdown, or if I don't want, I can. And this is, I'm creating all of these tags basically on my VM, and you will see that when we finish. So then we go into the last part, that is reviewing all the configuration that we create. So it's validating. So it's past validation. Okay. Here is all the configuration that we create. Okay. And the other option that we have is create. Although you see over here, download a template for automation. So if I click on over here on download a template for automation, okay, I'm downloading all the template. This again is a JSON file that you can have it. This is all the resource that you are doing. So this is all the things that we are creating. Okay, all of this VM that we are creating in the same way. And you can add to a library, you can download to your machine and then use this to all of that. Although there are some of those VMs that they are unique. For example, if you see over here, here are the tags that we configured, and over here is the on the variables. This is my subnet that we were creating, and here are the parameters of the location, the subnets, the disks, and the users, and all of that. Okay, so this is my, I can deploy this. I can click and deploy from here, or I can come to the VM and create. And the good thing about this, it's really simple. So now I'm just creating the VM. As you can see over here on my deployment progress, it's already starting. So see, is already created one resource called public IP address. It's already created another one called the NSGs. It's already created virtual networks. It's on the process of creating the storage accounts. It's already created the disk. So if I'm going to open, in this case, my resource group, okay, I can always come over here and I start to see all the resource, all the items of my VM coming into this resource group, even the VNet. That's why it's recommended to create a VNet prior to the VM, because creating from here the problem is it creates under the same resource group. So it's highly recommended you create a VNet on their exclusive resource group, so then you don't need, if anything happens or anyone by mistake click over here, delete the resource group, it will delete the VNet as well. So if I starting to refresh, here is more resources that are coming into my VM, in this case to my resource group, and here it's creating now the virtual machine. So look what it needs to create before creating the virtual machine. So the public IP, the network security groups, the virtual networks, the storage account, the disk, the network interface, and the storage account. Okay, so this is what it's creating and is doing the deployment. When this is finished, I will get an alert over here saying that it's done, and then I can access my VM. Okay, so at this present moment, if I'm going back to my home or to my virtual machines, I have the virtual machine over there on the creating stage. Okay, it's coming from the marketplace. Here it's my subscription, and here is my resource group where the VM is creating. I can come over here and says, yep, I still on creation. Here the status creating, but I can starting to see a few of those properties. So I can see this, it is a 2019 Windows Server Data Center. It's a V1 generation. I don't have a host group. I don't have a proximity. I don't have anything regarding that. Availability, it's scaling. Okay, I don't have availability set, not scale set available on this. The extensions is not there yet because it's still on creating. Okay, this is my public IP that is assigned because it's in this case is I've forgotten the name. It's dynamic. If I deallocate, if I stop this, probably this IP gonna change. Okay, here are my virtual networks. Here I don't have DNS configured. Here is the size and everything. Let's go see how is my deployment process. Okay, so the VM is ready. So now is on the deployment. It's still creating. Is doing the deployment of the anti malware. So he's adding. So my VM is already created. Is adding all the configuration that I did add extra just for you guys to see it. I don't have a particular script to just right now to just adding on this singular VM. If you have, of course, other options like PowerShell disaster configuration, you can create all of that by default and adding all of those scripts over here, and automatically will configure way better this VM than the simple clicks. Okay, it's going on this step. Let's see if my VM is here. Public IP address, the NSG network, the two disks. So this is the disk one that is my OS disk. This is the other disk as well. If I click on the disk, I can see that what is being the shares, availability zone, nothing is managed by this VM, is attached to this VM. But even if I see the size, I can change the size of the disk over here, the encryption, I see the encryption, networking, all of that. So let's go back to my deployment, and this will probably take a little bit more time to just creating the VM, and that is the idea over here. When it's finished, we will see that on here the alerts is finished the VM, and depending how you configure it will take more or less time to do it. Here it is what is being creating. can see the operational details, what is doing. So the VM is created, as you can see over here, and the deployment is complete, and now I can see my VM is up and running.